You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network. Are you listening to this podcast on your commute to work, on a walk to the store? Do you ever think about the strangers around you and how your life could change by saying hello? That's the premise of Lincoln Center Theater's new play, The Coast Starlight. Set aboard a long-distance train, the play examines the power of human connection and the ways in which we guess at each other's lives. As a special offer to our listeners, all tickets for the month of February are just $35. To purchase tickets for The Coast Starlight, visit telechargeoffers.com and use code COAST35. Previews begin February 16th. For more information, visit lct.org.
Mobile phone companies say they offer home internet. But if their internet comes from a cell phone network, you should know. It's just phone internet, not home internet. Keep your home up to speed with Cox. Cox internet is faster and has more reliable download speeds than 5G home internet. Cox is the real home internet you're looking for. Based on Cox analysis of Ookla speed test intelligence data Q3 2022 and Cox serviceable areas. Visit cox.com/internet for details.
One of the problems with intentionality is that we don't listen. We look and covet, but we're not listening to like what was the real thing behind it. And we're not listening to ourselves, like what would actually fill us, not give us attention for a few minutes, but really fill us.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risk for your creative life. I'm Heather Vickery.
And I'm Alan Seals. and I realized I haven't pulled up the notes yet, so I don't remember what the intro is.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, you sent it
He's
to
a
me.
Professional. He's a professional.
There we go. Got it.
Jeez Louise, man.
You would think we have this memorized by now.
No.
But we don't. All right. And I'm Alan Seals. We are two perfect strangers who met by chance and embraced opportunity. Listen in as we chat with other successful people about the risks they've taken to put themselves on a path to their own creative success.
Okay, I had to control myself writing this bio for today's guest.
Oh my
because
gosh.
I want to say everything about you, Xochitl. I was like, okay, you've got to make this. We have to have an actual interview. You can't just like blurt out everything. But we are inviting a woman that I've known for a really long time on the show today. Xochitl Gonzalez is with us. And gosh, I mean, I've known you, it's over a decade.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, yes. Isn't that
Which
crazy?
is crazy.
I know. Yeah.
We were both in the wedding industry together, like what feels like many lifetimes ago at this point.
Yes.
It's such a pleasure having Xochitl here with us today. This lady is on fire. I don't know. You've worn like every hat in the world from gallery girl to tarot card reader, which I actually want to ask about. Event planner.
Excuse me?
I'm into it. I'm super into it. Entrepreneur, and now I don't even know what all your titles are. Best-selling author of the brand new book, Olga Dies Dreaming, which is so good, by the way.
So good.
And has been turned into a pilot for Hulu, which got delivered today, today of this interview. Today.
And then we're just sort of either on the chopping block or not.
Oh my God. My heart just started to pound out of my chest. Xochitl has an MFA from the University of Iowa's Writers Workshop. She is the recipient, I'm not going to say this right, Michener-Copernicus Prize in Fiction, and the winter I need to drink more of this coffee. The winner.
So in 45 minutes, we'll be done with the bio, and we can have 2 minutes of interview.
This is my shortened version. Shut up. The Disquiet Literary Prize. She deserves all the props. I'm sorry.
I know. It's impressive.
She's published in Bustle and Vogue and The Cut, and is a contributor for The Atlantic, where you can find her newsletter, Brooklyn Everywhere. Holy shit. So, Xochitl, welcome to Was It Chance?
Hi. I'm so happy to be here. Actually, I'm super happy to be here because I just sort of love, not only have we known each other for a long time, but I love the premise of this podcast because I definitely think many things are serendipitous in the journey from when we met each other to this new bio, which is very long.
Yes, I know. Very long. That was my shortened. It was. I wrote it longer and then I cut it down. I was like, okay, we got to get all this in. Yes.
Well, it's weird for me. So I'm going to be the guy here or the person here to get this going because
Do it.
Heather, I don't know you from the wedding planner
me
world.
From Adam.
And so I don't know you from Adam or Eve. Heather, I don't know you from the wedding planning world. I only know you from the podcast world and the coaching world and whatnot now. And for both of you, I'm just impressed by leaving that behind and starting where you are now, because you're both incredibly successful where you've landed now together. And so tell me about when you started in the wedding planning industry. What was sort of this moment, right, where you're like, this isn't for me? Where am I going next?
That's so interesting. I feel like that moment happened 900 times, actually. No,
like the day we started. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no. Okay, here's what it is. It's like in the beginning, it was interesting, and it felt like there was a place to ascend to, if that makes sense. Like, but this is also in the era. I started that business with my best friend in the era of periodicals. Like, there must have been like 20 wedding magazines out there. And so like you could become like a famous wedding planner, and it felt like there was a lot of room to kind of grow. And I'm just sort of an aspirational person, and I'd been an art major, and I just didn't know what to do with those creative instincts. And it was good. And then we got through the recession and we made it through, but we were in so much debt, we couldn't afford to close the business. Does that make sense? Like, it's like, even if we want, like,
wow,
like, it was like one of these things where we had to live off of our line of credit because people lost their jobs, they canceled weddings, but then we still had enough weddings that we had to keep working, and we couldn't have managed.
This is like housing crisis, 08, 09.
Like, it hit us very early because we were in New York, and all of our clientele was like, at that time, I remember everybody was at Lehman and Bear Stearns, all of our clients. So it was like, and so we had enough work that we couldn't not like take jobs because we still had to fulfill those contracts, but we then weren't getting enough income to like cover our overhead. So then we ran up this debt on a line of credit that we probably shouldn't have been given. And so then it was like, we were literally in business to just pay off debt. Nobody talks about the predatory lending that happens to small businesses, by the way, businesses. It's so gross. But anyway, and then what happened just in the world, which is not anything that I'm deciding, it was like the whole Occupy Wall Street thing, is that when things came up, the middle was not quite the middle. So I think I used to service like lower well-off people. Does that, like, they were more than upper middle class, but they weren't
the 1.5%.
Yeah, or like the lower rung of the 1%, and then suddenly the people that were coming through the door were people with inherited wealth, like the upper 1%, and so your relationship with them just changed completely.
Totally different,
like completely different clientele. And at that point, there were some exceptions to the rule, but I stopped enjoying it as much because you definitely felt more like a servant than like a peer that was doing something fun. And the point, and I talk about this in the book a little bit, the point of the wedding took on different meaning. It wasn't just about celebrating love. Like, it sort of took on like social status and communicating something other existential about them and the family and like messaging. And so, but it just was sort of like we were working to pay off the business. And so we tried a lot of things to like change and it felt like, I felt a little like I was playing in too small of an arena, if that makes sense. Not the wedding world per se, but like just my talents. Like, and I had this blog and I enjoyed writing, but I got frustrated that I was always just writing about weddings. And I just sort of felt very confined. And so we kept trying to change our business in order to make more space. And then eventually, honestly, like, it was like we knew we were moving away from it. And then we had a friend pass away, and we had already more or less somebody else had taken over the day-to-day operations. And then we were like, we got to get out of here. And so but it takes a long time to extricate yourself from a small business. People don't realize that. Like, it's like, somebody asked me the other day, they were like, for an interview, they were like, can we get a sense of how much money you sold the business to? We sold it to the woman that had taken it over. And I was like, this is not, I sustained my life, and it was a nice life in New York. So I never felt like it was a failure of a business, but it was literally like, please take it off my hands. Like, it was not like, it was like, I just need a neat ending to this so that I'm not sitting here dealing with my accountants for the next 5 years. Like, and so I think it's hard to say. By the end, it was just like, oh my God, just get me out of here. And so and I don't know. And I was very, on the one hand, it's great to get dispassionate about something because people would be like, you suck. And you're like, no, I don't, but that's okay. Like,
I love though that you're shedding this light. I mean, people are they already are. They're going to be looking at you as someone who is just making it, who is so highly successful. You're doing things that seem impossible to people on the outside world. I think, I mean, your very first book out is a bestseller months and months and months before it's released, and the Hulu pilot and all of these things. But it's really important to see that you worked your ass off for this. And there are a lot of other things that happened. And you're like, just take my business. Just take my business.
Well, it's a great way to think about it. I'd never thought about it until you just said that. But like the best way to explain it is like, the book's kind of funny, but it also has a lot of pain in it. And every pain point was personally earned.
Yes.
And that is the best way to describe. Like, so I have fresh success in this arena, but it was earned by every wound inflicted in this book. Like that I either I personally bore or very closely bore. So I think that it's like, I look at it as my nice reward for my beautiful pain collage. Thank you. No, but no, and so like, I think it's not, I totally know what you mean, but I think it's like the reason why I think the book is doing well is because something about all of that trauma and like experience and the ability to find some humor in it is hitting with people, which I'm so grateful for, but it's only because it was very lived. Do you know what I mean? Like I could write it if it was very lived.
Yeah. Well, and I fully admit, as I was reading the book, which I love, by the way, Xochitl, it's so good.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I had a really hard time not seeing your face on the main character. My gosh. I told Bernadette that. I was like, did you see Xochitl the whole time?
Oh my God. Well, I'm hoping to God that people are only thinking it's Aubrey Plaza. So
yeah, exactly. So how much of it, I mean, this is a novel, but we all write from what we know. So how much of it is yours and how much of it is fiction?
I always say that she is essentially me if I'd been a Scorpio and not had therapy for 10 years. And so the base, a lot of things are fictionalized. Like I don't have any siblings. I was raised by both my grandparents, like not one of my grandparents. My dad's Mexican American. No, my dad's not dead. My mother now lives like in an RV in the Midwest, I think, but like, we're estranged, but they were political activists. That is how they met. That is why I was raised with my grandparents, because my mother was like off, like fighting for social justice in Latin America at that time and unionizing and working with the Sandistas and all these other things. And so that is why I live with my grandparents. And it was sort of a thing that we weren't allowed to talk about. Like, it's like, she would come maybe once a year, but like it wasn't allowed to be a trauma point, if that makes sense. Like it was sort of just like you weren't really allowed to deal with it. And then I think because other people noticed it, I think a lot of the genesis of my perfectionism, and which is some of the things I wanted to explore, is this idea of like not wanting to be defined by something, and how do you actively choose to not wanting to be defined by something. And so I did think that was an interesting premise for a book. And I knew I wanted to write about Puerto Rico, and I just sort of thought I'd written short stories like that I realized were all the same character. It was like Olga, like me, untherapized me as a Scorpio. And then but I kept giving her different professions. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then what I realized is I was like, and mainly because I didn't want to seem lazy. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I didn't want to, like, I didn't want to seem like, planner. I could totally come up with other professions, but what wedding planning does so uniquely is it allows you to look at class, like in a really specific lens, and it allows you to showcase, there are planners like this, but like for the most part, you as a planner know that the bus driver who's being paid minimum wage is actually the linchpin to the entire day and is the most valuable, is the MVP of and needs to be treated with almost as much grace and attention as your mother of the bride, like, because he will actually, like, and so I think what is that life when you are sort of, and you're also this like you're a peer, but then you're not quite a peer.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a good way to sort of talk about class and ethnicity and service and the different dynamics of that. And so I just decided to lean into it. And then it was kind of fun because, you get all these weird details that I've stored in my brain, like for all these years. And then you get to kind of like vomit them out. So it actually ended up being very fun.
So what was the chance that turned this into a Hulu pilot? Because this is a debut novel, first one, unproven author, and all of a sudden Hulu's like, yo, I like this. We're gonna do something with it.
It's an even chancier story than that, Alan. Like it's all because I have my childhood best friend who works in publishing is obsessed with the bar method, and I hate it. I hate the bar method. I hope that they don't hear this because they'll feel really badly. It's a fitness thing, where you go and you sort of do ballet to techno music.
Yeah, bark, B-A-R-R-E.
And you do like plies to like techno music. It's very weird, and she loves it, and I hated it, but it was like our way of bonding. So I basically like had a very expensive membership to this fitness club like in Brooklyn, and I went with her, and I had I won this literary prize, and I got into Iowa. And one day we were in the locker room, and a lot of people in publishing used to go to Bar Method. And so she starts chatting with somebody. She's like, oh, my friend Xochitl just got into Iowa. And so she was like, oh, I'm a literary agent, which obviously my friend knew. And she's like, you should send me your stuff. It turns out we had met via email years prior. We just didn't know because the way our names are spelled. And she had been a fan of my blog and wanted me to try to turn it into a memoir, but it was too dark. Like this is like maybe 5 years before. She's like, I think it's too dark for the marketplace. So she had already been a fan of my writing. And then off of 100 pages of Olga, I had only had 100 pages of the first draft. And she was like, not only do I want to sign you for book, I want to sign you from book to film. And she happened to be at CAA at that point. She'd been at Foundry when I first met her over email years prior, but then she was at CAA at that point. And so it never was intended to not be options. Like we always at that point intended to take it out for an option. And then it was like, it is more chance because like literally it went out and I had maybe 15 calls, and Hulu wasn't one of them. Like it was like a bunch of different, Ron Howard and like Crooked Media and a bunch of, oh my God, I'm telling all the people that like I didn't end up going, which I'm probably not supposed to do, but whatever. And then what ended up happening was I ended up meeting Alfonso Gomez and Ajon. He was like the last call. And like, I'm in Iowa at this point. There's nothing less sexy than Iowa City. Like it's like, and you're freezing. It's like February. So like, and you're freezing in your own house because it's so cold outside. So I'm completely bundled and I'm getting like all these people in their cars in LA. And it's like, please hold for blah, 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 blah. And then you'd be on hold for like 10 minutes while you wait for the person to connect for the call. And Alfonso was like the only person that like just called me himself. And he was like 3 minutes early. He's like, is it okay? I'm 3 minutes early. I was just nervous to talk to you. And so like, it was the most earnest call. And I called my agent and I was like, I know a lot of these other people are going to be able to pay me more money, but I really want to work with this guy. And like the next week, right before lockdown, like March 13th, it was Friday, March 13th, I got a phone call and it was like, Hulu just read the book. They're desperate to option it. They only want you to write the pilot. And I was like, well, let's see how they feel about me doing it with Alfonso. And it turns out they love him. They had just passed it with deep regret on a project that he had brought to them. And so that was kind of me and him together, like sealed the deal for them. And that was how we ended up moving forward.
So cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. And wait, actually more serendipity. It's even more crazy. Alfonso had been with the same, he'd done Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, and he had been with the same agent his whole career. Like he'd won Emmys for, oh my God, American Horror Story, and he directed a bunch of Glees. He'd been with the same agency for his whole career. The day that he got to CAA, his first day at CAA was the first day that my book was out for option. And that was the first thing that they handed him.
Oh my gosh.
And so like, it was his first day as a CAA client. And the first thing they gave him was my book, and he read it in one day. And then we talked that Friday, and that's how this all happened.
That is incredible.
Isn't that crazy?
I am too. Okay. So can you take us to that that moment, that day, Hulu, they want it. Like, what are you feeling?
Well, the truth is, what was funny is that I had already been in slight disbelief because the book sold in the 10 house auction. So I was in Iowa when that was happening. And so it was like 2 days of like just the price going up as an auction does.
That's
insane. Yeah. And so that happened like February 26th, which is a year to the day that I had the idea for the book. And the same day that I had the idea for the book was the same day I found out I got into Iowa. So there was so much weird stuff, just spiritual plane. This is bigger than me and like whatever. And so I had decided, it was sort of like, I think the bat had been eaten earlier that year. And we were like, should I come back for spring break? Because I was in Iowa. I was like, should I come back for spring break? And my best friend was like, oh, Myra, Myra, Heather.
Yes.
Myra was like, look, isn't it better if you get stuck? You get stuck here. Although nobody had been in lockdown. We didn't even know what stuck meant. I just knew that in LA, people had started not going to the office. So I got on a flight and I was like, and the main reason I was going was because I was going to meet my editor on Friday the 13th. And then I was going to take my friends that had been my readers on the book, out to dinner with their partners. And so we were at drinks before that dinner when I got the call from Hulu.
Holy shit.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Talk about a celebration.
I know, except that we were the only people in the restaurant because everybody was afraid. And the next day they shut down the whole city. And so.
Wow. Going out strong though.
It was like, yeah. But what was so weird about it was that then it was like, I sort of entered into the pandemic knowing that my life was changing, but then nobody knowing about it. And so I don't know, it was very weird. It was I was working on this patent, blah, blah, blah. And because I knew so many people in the event space, so many people's businesses were in collapse in especially those first few months. So I really didn't want to talk about it with anybody because I felt it was great that it was happening, but I think it was actually good. It gave me a lot of time to adjust, and wrap my head around things and and revise the book and write the pilot and do all this stuff. But it was a very surreal, chain of events.
Are you listening to this podcast on your commute to work, on a walk to the store? Do you ever think about the strangers around you and how your life could change by saying hello? That's the premise of Lincoln Center Theater's new play, The Coast Starlight. Set aboard a long-distance train, the play examines the power of human connection and the ways in which we guess at each other's lives. As a special offer to our listeners, all tickets for the month of February are just $35. To purchase tickets for The Coast Starlight, visit telechargeoffers.com and use code COAST35. Previews begin February 16th. For more information, visit lct.org.
23-year-old Walt Mendez finally got his dream job, working in show business. The only problem is his new boss, a low-level talent agent with rageaholic tendencies.
You're a nice person, Walt. That's going to be a problem. So listen, whatever your impulse is, do the opposite.
When she has a heart attack on his first day, leaving him alone, clueless and in charge, he discovers some questionable financial dealings, led by her dentist husband.
I'm literally doing root canals on anything with insurance.
And he turns to his ruthless predecessor for advice.
Walt, grow a pair. You're in the Hunger Games.
Soon, his shady ex-boyfriend resurfaces, coming on strong and making the job suddenly more attractive.
Am I making you nervous?
A little.
And it's turning you on, isn't it?
All heard through his headset at the office, Rolling Calls is a hilarious dark comedy starring Julie Halston, Richard Kind, Dan Rosales, Matt Doyle, Wesley Taylor, Luis Miranda, Aaron Davey, Brittany Mack, Andrea Macassette, and more. Get ready for Rolling Calls at bpn.fm/Rolling Calls or everywhere you listen to podcasts.
So you've got, you said you were an art major?
I was a fine art and art history double major,
so
yeah.
Art history major, which is not writing, wedding planning, which is not writing, where you can write the way that you use words and put them together to make these eloquent, beautiful sentences. Just the content aside, story aside, the way that you're writing is absolutely beautiful. And it's a style that I haven't read in a long time. It's very, very, it brings you in a way that a lot of authors don't.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I honestly really actually have no idea. It's just the way my brain thinks. Like, it's just the way my brain, I mean, I'm like, if this was a literary podcast, I'd be like stoned because everybody's like, I don't even really know. I don't actually get to read that much. I've gone through periods of intense reading. When I was a kid, I read constantly. And when I was a young adult, I read constantly. And then I became a wedding planner and my brain was broken. And if I got through
done that.
Like sometimes it's like you would get through, like you'd go through a weird period and you'd go through a lot of books. And then there'd be times where it's like, I don't know, I'm half drunk coming back from some networking mixer or tasting. And I'm like, and I'm not exactly like very, very productive. And so when I decided I wanted to write, I did get back to reading and I was reading more critically and I read a lot of books that I loved and I was reading them as a writer. But
yes.
If that makes sense, like I was going back and looking at them as a writer, but I don't know. I think it's just the way that my brain forms sentences and it's the way that I like, I don't know, it's cadences that I've liked. I haven't been touched by is like a ton of contemporary fiction, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, whatever, this is like, I don't want to sound complainy, but the truth of the matter is that the MFA is the way that most books get published. Not all books, but a lot of books, especially new books and new authors.
You get the connections, right? It's all about networking.
Yes. Yeah. And so, and it's like, I don't know how to put it. It's a bit of a shorthand for agents and editors. It's like, oh, well, they have to be, if I've got a giant stack like this and I know they went to Iowa or Columbia or whatever, I know this will probably be good. So like, let me just parse my way through the stack. And it's a way to manage your time more efficiently. I completely get it. I think what happens though, is that you end up reading a lot of things that your peers read. Whereas like, because I was 20 years older, a lot of the stuff that I was influenced by are books that were published like 20 years ago when I was like fresh out of college and had time to read and had like a 9-to-5 job and I would get on the train and I'd read like a book a week. And so like, I think that probably in a funny way, it sounds fresh now, but it's probably old fashioned. Like I bet if I picked up Gary Steingart's first book, I'd probably write a lot like Gary Steingart. Like, like it's like when I think about books like that, I was very influenced by like Jonathan Letham's like early work. Like that was stuff that I was like devouring when I was in my 20s. Like, and so I suspect that actually, if anything, it was influenced more by that. And then it is literally though, all the secret thoughts that have been in my brain that I never get to say because nobody wants to hear such long sentences.
I love that.
That's beautiful. And I love that it's just so natural because as your debut novel, I think your subsequent novels, which of course I hope there are many more, are just going to get that much better. But when the whole thing about a screenplay, when that was coming about, were you like, great, yeah, that sounds no problem. Side note, Google to myself, how do I write a screenplay?
100%. No, 100%. And it's like, well, this actually is probably just helpful. Like what I did, the hardest part is I used to be, isn't this so weird when you realize this? I used to be like, what do they call them? Early adopters of technology things. Mm-hmm. Like I'd be like,
that would be Ellen.
Like,
that would be Ellen.
Yeah. Hello. But now I'm like, I don't know how to use anything. And so like the hardest part is learning how to use the software. I was like, my brain doesn't know how to do this. But what I did do is I picked shows that I really admired and I found their pilot scripts and I sat and I would read the pilot script and watch the pilot and then stop and read how they had described what I was just watching. And that helped me then understand how to convey on paper what I was hoping to see. And then Alfonso is literally like the most patient human being in the world and like doesn't shame me about some of the very early, really shitty stuff that only he saw. But like I definitely and it was COVID. Like I had COVID when I was doing this. Like it was like early
You
pandemic.
did? Oh no.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so, I had the time or the mental space and nobody was really pressuring us because it was a strange pandemic-y time. And yet at the same time, by Hollywood standards, this has come together quite quickly. Like by Hollywood standards, it's come together insanely quickly. Yeah.
Can I ask you about I'm going to say decision. I'm not sure how much of it felt like a decision to you. You were very public about this whole process. You newslettered. You sent a newsletter. What is that in active form? Consistently. I mean, I full disclosure, I wasn't on your newsletter list. I am now, but my partner Bernadette was.
Yeah.
And she would literally come to me every day. She's like, "Oh my God, you've got to hear this." So I didn't have to be, because I had my own social fan club. But was there a thought process in, I'm going to talk about this out loud and big? And was it just because you wanted to share, or?
Well, some of it is, a lot of it was because I got off Facebook after the elections.
Yes.
And
good for you.
At the same time, it didn't mean that there weren't people that I liked that I only saw there.
Yeah.
And so I've had this weird life. I mean, you know this, Heather, from the wedding space. You meet so many people.
Yes.
And so many different kinds of people. And then I had different strata of career, like I had this early career in advertising and I knew some people there. And like, I just sort of felt like I had these people over different strata that, like if they reach out and reply and say hello, it'd be nice to hear what they're doing. And let me just tell them what I'm doing, because I'm not doing status updates on Facebook.
Yeah.
So it's that newsletter is not that big now. Like some strangers are subscribing, but like, it's like generally it's like, I consider it a friends and family.
Yeah.
It's like, it's friends and family. It's extended friends. And sometimes it's people like somebody might write back and I haven't talked to them in 15 years. But it's still really nice. It's not, but it's not like, I'm like, why the fuck are you talking to me? No, I'm like, oh, it's so nice to hear from you. And so that was why I did it. It felt like I would probably be status updating on this if I was, and I didn't feel like there was a failure. I sort of like, there was no real option for failure. I think to your point about the podcast being about like, what was it? Mitigated risk? What's the language you use about risk?
Intentional risk.
Intentional risk.
Yeah.
Look, I had originally thought I was going to I went to Bread Loaf and I decided to write. I was like, I'm going to go to this writers conference I'd heard about. That's decently prestigious. You have to apply to get in. So I was like, I'm going to try to get into this writers conference. And I think they accept like 10% of the applicants.
Decently prestigious is my nickname, by the way.
Yeah. And so when I got in, I was like, okay, you can't be a bad writer. You got into this conference. And then I went, and it was like that weird, that Blind Melon video where the girl's in the bee outfit and she gets to the other side of the hill and she sees all the bees. And I was like, oh, these are my people. Like, this is like, these are my people. And this is my art form. Like, I was like, this is the art form that you were supposed to have been doing like all that time when you're diddling around with really bad painting it brown. And so I then was like, okay, I got so much better in 10 days. I was like, I think I want to try and get my MFA. And I'll just do it at night. Like I had this new job. I got a 9-to-5 job at Hunter College. I was like, I'll go in the evenings. I'll like write on the weekends. I was like, I'll just figure it out. And I had no intention of moving to get this MFA. I decided two things. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to go into debt. And then at the last minute, a writer friend of mine that I'd met at that conference is like, you should just apply to Iowa. It's fully funded. It's free. And it skyrockets your career if you go there, because it's the best writing program in the world.
Yeah.
It's the first and the best of the MFA programs. And so, or so they say. Is it the best? That's subjective, but I loved it. And so I ended up I was like, sure, because I looked it up and I think they get like 1,000 applicants and they admit like 1% of all their applicants, like something insane, 2%, maybe like 2 to 3%. So I was like, the chances of getting in are so low. And I literally had to write a story to give them enough pages to make my application. Like that's how little writing I had productively finished at that point. And so I did. And then in the interim, while I was waiting to see if I got in anywhere, I was trying to think about what I would write a novel about. I was like, well, you're going to go to an MFA. You want to walk out with the novel. And when I got into Iowa, it's like literally they paid me for the first year. I didn't have to teach or anything. Like I just had to write. And so that privilege felt insane. And I was like, but I'm going to give up this rent stabilized apartment and I'm going to have to move to Iowa and be in Iowa. And one of my friends is like, and you will get so much further in 2 years. It'll take you twice as long to do what you can do in Iowa. Yeah. And just because I'm a lunatic, I then, the other thing is like, you're 43, 2 academic years goes by in the blink of an eye. Like you don't have that same sense of time when you're in your 20s. And so I got there and I was like, I don't really know anybody. I'm so much older. It's not that I was unfriendly, but I basically just hid in my apartment and wrote this book. And so I walked in with 200 pages and I finished the novel. Again, serendipity. I walked in and they said, this semester, the head of the program is offering a novel writing workshop, but you can only get in if you've got 80 or more pages of a book done already. And I was like, I have 200. We get to the class and everybody in the class is like, young. And so of course, like, she's like, who wants to go first? And everybody's like, And I was like, well, why the fuck did this is why I moved to Iowa. I was like, yeah, great. Like, I'm like, why did I move to Iowa other than this? So I got the chance to get feedback my first week. And then by the end of I got to get feedback the last week because I finished the novel over the course of the first semester, the first draft, And so
that's incredible.
So I guess it's like, I think it's serendipity, but sometimes it's also taking, maximizing the chance that you get.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
intentional risk.
Yes. Because I could have gotten there and I could have been sad and homesick and spent all my time going back to New York and, flying to see somebody in Chicago or whatever, and not just hiding in my house and working. But I was like, you have 2 opportunities to get feedback from some of the best, fresh, up and coming writers like in the country. Do it. And so I just made a bit, I don't even want to say sacrifice. That's how I decided to use that time. And so, when people are like, you sold your book while you were still in Iowa, it's like, yeah. And actually the funniest part is I actually walked out of that first year with 175 pages of a new book. I just decided I didn't like the direction of it and I needed to put it on hold and start something different. And so I actually finished a book and a half while I was in Iowa. So in the first year, the second year, nothing got done. School was all on Zoom. Like I was like writing a screenplay and like, I was doing so many other things, but like the first year, like, yes.
Wow. So I don't know if you know this or not, but I just published a book, came out in October, is not a novel. It's personal professional development. And I love writing. I actually have a creative writing degree, undergraduate, not an MFA, but I can't wrap my head around how you people write novels, like all of the parts and the weaving and the dropping holy shit.
No, I've always wanted to write radio dramas for podcasts, right?
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
When there's a good twist that happens in a show, I'm like, I could have never thought of that. My brain is a technical brain. It's not a storytelling brain.
How do you keep track of it all? How do you do that?
Well, that felt more like wedding planning. Does that make sense? Like, it's like that was just like, okay.
Just need to keep track of the details.
Yeah, no, it felt like, all right, but what is who called the band to follow up on what their sound equipment is? Like, right? Like, it's like where are they sleeping? Like, it's like that is like, I think the wedding planning brain of keeping track of a lot of details, and that you can get so myopic in like flowers that like you were like, oh my God, I haven't talked to the frickin' tent guy in 3 months. Like, let me just make sure that everything is still fine and that we got the permits and blah, blah, blah. Like, and so I do think that was a big part of it.
That's funny. I admire your ability to do that. So how much control, or did you have any control in casting? Because you were on set. I mean, you're a screenwriter. So
Alfonso and I, executive producer and screenwriter. Alfonso and I cast every single person. And as a matter of fact, nobody at CAA wants to hear this, but the way Jesse Williams ended up being in it is actually because we have a mutual friend. And I was like, let me just get him the script and see if he'll even consider it. Because he didn't want to do TV at the moment because he'd been on Grey's for so long. Yeah. And just wanted a break. TV's like it's grueling. It's very different than film. And a little different on streamers. But network TV is like, it's so many episodes. It's like, it's like a real schedule. And so really like, and that was, we had a lot of say. And obviously 20th and Hulu. But like, when it came time, the first name that I gave when they were like, what about Olga? Oh my God, by the way, people like say like ridiculous things. Like now it's so funny because it started in early 2020 before like the summer of George Floyd, when people would like they'd be like, what about Penelope Cruz? And you're like, she's from Spain. It's like, she is actually from Spain. Like not this person, but the first name that I gave was actually Aubrey Plaza. And then that was serendipitous in the sense that I was like, please get the book to Aubrey. And then when she finally got her hands on it, loved it. And that, and I don't know that I could imagine anybody else playing the role. I mean, she's just fantastic. So yeah, no, it was like a lot of, we had a lot, to the point, like, we're like, let's pick Alfonso, which person do you want to be the extra that crosses the room? Blah, blah, blah. Like, no, like we were like, It was a lot of it was extremely hands-on, hands-on.
Heather, this is what you're telling about where you were crying when no one called you to be an extra walking across the room.
Yes, I was mortally wounded that this blonde white girl was not invited to be part of it. It's like, yeah, no. I mean, it's an incredible cast. We didn't mention Ramon Rodriguez, who is just so charming. And I do have to admit, Jesse Williams has the most magical eyes in all of Hollywood. And so I can't wait to see him play Mateo.
Oh my God. No, he's so fabulous. And then like some people that weren't even in it. Well, Jessica Pimentel, who a lot of people know as Maria on Orange, is Mabel. Laz Alonso plays Reggie King. Eric Stoltz plays one of the Selby's. And Dermot Mulroney plays Dick. So those are some of the casting announcements we didn't make publicly because they were, not series regulars. But
I love that. So I wrote, there's one line, and it's so random that it's Dick's line, which is so weird, that I wrote down as I was reading because it connected with me for this show. Opportunities that often lie in wait.
Yes. Yeah. It's a good line. No, he's not he just sees.
He's not a dick. He's not a dick.
I mean,
he's kind of a dick.
He's a dick. He's a Richard. That's a good way to put it. He's a Richard. And sometimes he's a dick.
Yeah.
I think I've known so many. I think what I really wanted to do, I mean, look, if you were going to go and give this like a literary read, every character that has a POV has is a symbol of something.
Yeah.
And so he is the symbol of sort of Americanism in our government. And so it's like, it's not that I think that the government is like, I'm going to wake up and harm Puerto Rico. I think it's like, well, we stand something to gain, and here they are. They belong to us. Let's just do it.
Yes.
Like, it's just like, well, we could, you know what? We need a Navy base. We'll put it over here. It's a passive, use of privilege that it causes harm, but there's no thought given to that. And so that is really his function, and why. Because there was early debate that I never cared about. By the way, but Sam Chang, who runs the Iowa Writers Workshop, was she's a person I never was worried would take a wrong opinion. She was like, you just are literally I'm okay, cool. That goes over my head. I don't want to do it. I can take feedback that if the feedback hits, I'll take it. Do you know what I mean? But if it doesn't, if I'm okay, no, that's not what I'm trying to do. You just have to learn to ignore it. I do think that, by the way, is a big part. Good editing skills is a big part of making change.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you think? Because
let's talk about that. Because to me, that's about chance and embracing and intentional risk and letting that process happen. Yeah.
Yes. Well, opportunities that lie in wait is one good thing, because it's I see where this could go. But I think sometimes, the problem is that the challenge, and why it took so long to get out of weddings, to go back to your earlier question, Ellen, is sometimes your impulse is I need change. And so you jump at the first thing that comes your way, and you don't necessarily, see the longer path or stop to listen to how it makes you feel. And so you can make false starts, you know what I mean? And I think, I think it's that to me is a part of it, is also risk, but is the risk taking you to a good place? Or is it just taking you farther from where you're trying to get away from?
Well, how do you decide?
How do you decide? That's my question.
Yeah.
How do you decide?
What I think about is is this a short-term feel good, or is this a long-term feel good? So, and to go back to the Iowa thing, I didn't think it was going to go like this necessarily. That felt like one possible wild card option, but I was what would be a nice outcome that's totally feasible? And I was you get an MFA, you come back, your day job now, maybe you can edit books, and, you keep writing, you write another novel on the weekends and in the mornings the way you wrote this novel. You know what I mean? And so I sort of saw it as a way to have a career around something that I liked, which is involving the art of literature, right? And so it could have had a different, totally attainable outcome that I could see a very clear path towards. And then this was sort of the wild card. This is and then it could also go wildly well. And then this could be a possibility. So I think that the worst outcome still felt like a good outcome. And that's probably the way that I assess it. Quote unquote worst outcome.
I like that a lot. That pause to say, is this an immediate feel good, and what could that, is it going to dissipate quickly? It's like chiclet gums. Like this is going to taste great for 30 seconds, and then it's going to be the most disgusting thing I've ever had in my mouth. Or, you know, am I not going to get an instant wonderful feedback on this, but it's going to pay off if I stick with it.
Yeah. And I think even sometimes, like, I don't know, I think about, like, I'd gotten a divorce in the middle of all this, probably right around when I met you, Heather. And like, I remember just being like, this is going to feel hard in the beginning, but better at the end. And when I weighed the staying versus the leaving, I was like,
yep, been there, done that.
There'll be a deeper, worse moment, but then it'll be better. And that, like, you know, so I think sometimes that's like part of it. It's like, you have to just sort of take a second and just, you know, do a little bit of scenario assessment. Right? Like, yeah.
I believe that's true, especially when you're talking about intentional risk and intentional risky creation, and risky, you know, kind of being a subjective word, but yes, like, what is this payoff? And are we willing to be uncomfortable or even sad or unhappy in the short term for a desired result?
Honestly, there were days, like, not to make it sound like all roses, it was awesome to like have the ability to write. But there were days, especially in Iowa, where I was I was so depressed. I would call home and cry. I would call my best friend and cry, like that. I was like, I didn't see people. Like, I don't know. I was like very difficult especially in the beginning. I mean, and I was like, what am I doing? You know, like, and the main risk was that I was like, I might not be able to afford to move back to New York. Like, right. Like, cause you're like, now you know, that I was like, am I going to be able to get into another apartment? Am I going to be able to do this? Can I do that? And I was like, that'll make me very, very sad. But then I was like, but writing will make me happier. And I could always move to New Orleans. Like, I started trying to think about other cities where I could go. And then it turned out that I ended up writing about Brooklyn, which enabled me to move back to Brooklyn, which is sort of beautiful, right? Like, that's kind of poetic and nice.
I love that.
There was something that we touched on or Heather said in the bio that we haven't come back to, which is tarot cards.
Oh yeah.
And we're talking about manifestation, intentional creation. Different people have different interpretations of what that means, right? And some people call it just like godlike spirituality or divine intervention or whatever the case is. And you had mentioned when you were telling like all of the great things that happened to you that it was like, I forget what you said. It was something like kismet. I'm paraphrasing, right?
Yeah.
But serendipity, which we as a name we thought about calling this show something with serendipity. I bought all sorts of URLs with that name in it.
So for you who, you know, obviously we're in the tarot card space, where I assume that through that there is some sort of spirituality that that permeates your life, whatever that. I guess, what does that mean to you, and how do you harness that power, whether it be a mindset or, you know, or I'll stop and shut up. Let you talk.
No. Well, I'm very spiritual. I very much believe in God, and I believe in a universal higher order. I think I see an astrologer every year. I'd be remiss to not talk about it because, again, it's about like calculated opportunity. I just think there's no such thing as chance of time and space and place. Like, it's like why was this person born in this moment in this location? Like, and so I see this astrologer every year. And a few years ago, you know, I was like, well, and he was like, well, you're not going to meet anybody until, oh my God, isn't it so funny when these things sound so far away? Like, it's like not until like 2022 or like 2020, like, and I was like, but like, no. And he was like, so, and I thought to myself, well, then I'm just going to take this time and focus on getting really good at writing. Like, do you know, like, it's like I and so it helped me prioritize like where I should put my energy, if that makes sense. And so, and I think the thing with the tarot is it isn't fortune telling. It's much more like you are getting what you need in order to make sense of the moment or the question at hand and the time. And so, you know, and just to go back to the astrologer, so then like, he's like, I think when we were going into 2020, he was like, the next year, meaning 2020, he's like, it's going to be a massive life-changing year for you. You're going to go into it one way and come out of it another way. He was like, so if you want to be on a world stage, this is the time. And that's when I was like, I'm going to write this fucking book. Like, I'm going to get this book done and be ready to go in 2020. And so it created deadlines for me internally, like, if that makes sense, like where I was like, because I was like, well, if I could be ready for the moment of opportunity, then let's just see where it goes. Right. And that. Like, and what it also made me do, just to go back to the romantic thing, is it made me just chill, like, because it was like, it's going to sort itself out. It's just going to look different. Like, it's just going to look different. And now I just definitely, I do this I do this workbook every year. I love it. It's Susanna Conway called Unravel Your Year. And ever since I love that word, like, that's been a giant part of my process, actually. And she makes you pick a word for the year. Yeah. And so, like, you know, I think a couple of years ago it was expansive, and then it was like epic, like, and then this year I picked divine, because I have so many things up in the air. Like, the book was going to come out, and the show, you know, we'll see what happens, and I have all these other weird opportunities and strange things going on. And I was like, I just have to remember that it's meant to go the way it's meant to go. You know what I mean?
Surrender.
Surrender is a great one too, you know? Yeah. So yeah, I think the tarot thing, people always wanted, it's so funny because I would always say, like, the cards, the question used to help me figure out how to read the cards, because
intuitive guidance.
Yes.
It's teaching you to trust your intuition.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I love that you do that and all those things. I just grabbed these because they're next to me. I just released a set of manifestation card decks.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Thank you. They really are lovely and beautiful. But all of the things you said, that's what our hope is for them. And one of our words is unravel. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, that is crazy.
There are 48 cards, but it is just that. It's, you know, we're not foretelling your future. We're not telling you what to do. The trick is pull a card or do a spread and say, where do I feel this in my body? What does this mean to me? If I keep this word in my mind, unravel, for example, throughout the day, when is it going to go, and unravel is intentional. Unravel.
Well, I think that's the whole thing about the whole thing, is it's all intentional.
Yeah.
And I think I read this thing. It was like an advice column in the Washington Post recently. And the person was like, I don't know what to do because I'm very jealous of my friends' successes. And I'm generally like a good person, but I'm jealous of and the advice columnist had such a great take on it. And they were like, your friends are finding success because they're pursuing things that are genuinely passionate for them. And you are jealous because you might want the shiny part of it, but you're not actually spiritually connected to the rationale behind the endeavor. And if you were, you wouldn't be jealous. And I realized how one of the problems with intentionality is that we don't listen. We look and covet, but we're not listening to like what was the real thing behind it. And we're not listening to ourselves, like what would actually fill us, not give us attention for a few minutes, but really fill us.
That's beautiful.
I'm going to make that part of the terms of service for all social media.
Well, no, it's so funny. And actually, because I can tell you right now, I'm in like the part of the process of like being a quasi famous writer. And I have to spend a lot of time on social media because I can't tour. So I have to engage with people. And like, I will tell you that is all much less rewarding than being by myself and writing. Like, I'm appreciative that more than anything, what I am appreciative of, because I've had the challenge in my own life, is that people are spending time reading the book. Like, so it's like, I really genuinely am like, thank you for reading this book. But the time there and like the people being like, thank you. And I'm like, cool. But like, that's beautiful to see that it's touching people. I love it. I don't want to say that I don't, but it's not as rewarding as the time when I'm actually getting the sentences out.
Well, and that's because that's your passion.
That's right.
Like, that's
but
where
I think
you
that's why I know somewhere out there's somebody, probably many people that are like, why is she the one whose book is a bestseller? You know, like, and it's like, but to the point of the Washington Post columnist, they're coveting
that's right.
the external thing and not listening to like, what is it that this brings them? Like, is that their thing? Is writing really their thing? It's like, you know, like, and where is their joy in there? So I thought that was a really good piece of advice. Because I think when you're in your 20s, you find so much more jealousy. Do you know what I mean? Because you just don't know what you're doing. Like, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And so it really resonated, that little bit of advice.
It's even worse now.
And there's something about,
because you see so much. You see so much, and you don't
Constantly.
see any of the iceberg underneath, right?
Mhm.
Like, yeah.
But there's something magical about being in your 40s, at least
Oh my
in
God,
my
it's so
experience.
good.
And maybe it is what you said, because you don't see the whole iceberg when you're younger. I always just call it lived experience. Like, you haven't had enough lived experience to know that none of it fucking matters. Like,
That's right.
just zero fucks completely. I tell all my friends, I'm like, welcome to the 40s club. All your fucks just get to disappear,
That's
and you
right.
get to do what feels good.
The bad fucks, not the good fucks.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And-
the good
and-
fucks hopefully don't disappear.
And then when you put your energy into something that you care about, and then you get the results that you want. So I call it a midlife catharsis.
It is a midlife catharsis. And I think it's like, you're so much better at editing, to go back to that. Like, you're so much better at editing. And like, this is good. This is not good. This is worth time. This is not worth time. And what we're really editing is our time.
Absolutely.
Right? Like we're editing the use of our time and where that gets spent, because it's not even that we squander it. It's that like we allow other people to waste it. Well, one of my favorite letters in the book is when the mother talks to her about time and men and women and their relations to time. And I stand by that letter. The mom is always, she's like always a little bit wrong, but then always a little bit right. And then, like, what makes her so difficult. Like,
Hello, attractive and discerning podcast listener. Have you lost weight? I'm Tom Allen Robbins, creator and writer of Twits in Love, a steampunk distraction. It's a radio comedy here on the Broadway Podcast Network.
And I'm Michael Urie, also known as Cyril Chippington Smythe, your favorite boob and the star of Twits.
We're here to tell you that in addition to being a podcast, Twits in Love is now available as a real live hold-in-your-hands book on Amazon.
Or e-reader.
Yes, you can get it on a Kindle.
Kindle.
But you can also listen to it here on the Broadway Podcast Network, performed by an unbelievable cast.
Aw, shucks. Join me and a slew of amazing actors like Christian Borle, Mary Testa, Dakin Matthews, Kira Allen, James Monroe Iglehart, Lilias White, and Anne Harada in a story about the world's richest man, Cyril Chippington Smythe, his steam-powered valet Bentley, and his chinless cousin Binky, as they navigate a dystopian world in search of love and meaning.
Listen to Twits in Love, available now everywhere you find podcasts, and make sure to learn more about getting the book by visiting bpn.fm/twits.
Wait, where do I go?
bpn.fm/twits, you boob. Yes. Or you can go to twitschronicles.com.
Gotcha.
Mobile phone companies say they offer home internet. But if their internet comes from a cell phone network, you should know. It's just phone internet, not home internet. Keep your home up to speed with Cox. Cox internet is faster and has more reliable download speeds than 5G home internet. Cox is the real home internet you're looking for. Based on Cox analysis of Ookla speed test intelligence data, Q3 2022, and Cox serviceable areas. Visit cox.com/internet for details.
Where do you find that you are in your most creative element then? If you've been, Amy, you said like there are moments when you're just like depressed, you don't want to do anything, but then when you're by yourself, you're very, that's where you want to be.
Yeah,
but so how do you find your ultimate creativity?
Oh my God. Like, it's hard now. I'm better when I'm alone, is a better way to put it. Like, I'm better when I'm like by myself for extended periods of time. Like, it's harder to dip in and out, not impossible, but it's harder to dip in and out of it if I'm like a day that I'm doing like this. Like, I have, like, I always tell Melissa, just put them all on the same day, because I'm not going to do this and then like
go back,
bang out like 1,000 great words. Like, you know, like that. It's harder for me to dip into that space if I'm publicly performing in any way. Like, if I'm just with like my very close friends or whatever, like, but if I'm having to like be the external version of me, like I have a hard time dipping into the internal version of me in the same time space. So next month I'm trying to do not unfortunately, I'm so happy people are interested in talking about the book, but like next month, like I'm hiding in the desert in California to try and work on this
good for you.
book. And I'm doing much less of this than I've been doing for like the last 2 months. Right. And that'll feel really good and nice. Like, I miss that state of being.
Yeah. Well, you're in a forced wait space now. I mean, the book is out.
Yeah.
And it is getting so much acclaim. Of course, you know, when we for me, when I got pregnant, I saw all the pregnant people. And when I got a new car I'd never heard of before,
yeah, of course.
I see the car everywhere. And I know you, and I'm reading your book, and your book is everywhere. But literally, like my library put it on there, hot new reads for the month, and Goodreads, and everywhere. It's everywhere.
I think it might be everywhere. To your point, like I just said that to somebody the other day. I was like, they were like, your book is everywhere. I was like, is it, or is it false pattern recognition? I don't know. I was like, but then my aunt called me and she's like, it's in the Danbury Library. Like,
I mean, it's kind of everywhere, but also I'm very in tune to it. So what's next? Like the pilot is delivered today.
Stage play, musical. Let's turn it into a musical.
Oh my God, it's so funny, Alan. I have recurring nightmares that I talk to Alfonso about all the time, where like my mother like sits quietly and is never offended by anything, and like is like, and then one day I'm at the premiere of Olga the musical, and she comes in and causes a giant disturbance on opening night. She's had enough. It was the bridge too far. You're not like,
a bridge too far. No,
like a recurring nightmare. Like I was like, it's like the orchestra's tuning up, and then my mother bursts onto the stage.
Well, stress dreams are the best. That's my stress dream is that I have to go on stage as a standby for a role that I've never rehearsed and have no script for.
There is a movie, a Buñuel movie. Have you ever seen it? I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's oh my God, it's like a surrealist 70s film by Buñuel. I'm trying to remember his first name. And it is amazing. And it's about these people that are trying to get dinner together, and something happens, and one night they end up on stage in a role in a play about a dinner party, and none of them had any idea they were going to be there and don't know their lines. It's fabulous. Anyway, I love that stress dream. It's a good stress dream. Yeah.
So when will you know from Hulu? When will you know?
I'll know by March for sure. And then we either spend the spring and summer writing and shooting, or we see what the next step of that journey might be for it. If not at Hulu, then maybe somewhere else. I mean, Hulu's been very supportive up until this point, but you just never know. And then I'm very proud of it. I'm so proud of it.
You should be.
Yes.
And then, I'm working on the second book, and I'm working on a couple of screenplays for features, which is kind of exciting. But, I think mainly I love books. So I just, I really love films. I think TV for Olga, it's such a complicated story. Episodic TV just felt like it needed more space.
Absolutely. And I can see it. Each chapter is like an entire episode.
Yeah.
Of a 30 minute. I don't know how much time you have, but
we're actually working in 30 now. So I'm very, and the cast is amazing. It was more like, it is very creative working as an EP and working as a creator on TV. It's just that it's definitely, there's a lot of it that feels like what makes me feel like I'm planning a wedding. And so I kind of don't like, like I don't necessarily love that, being the ringmaster of many, many things. Like
unfortunately are my monkeys. It is my circus.
Yeah. I'm definitely more happy here. As I always say to Alfonso, I was like, I'm failed Greta Garbo. I'm always like, I want to be alone. And then I end up always like in these big rooms.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. So if you look at sort of this path in front of you, and we're talking about intentional creation, and you're excited and you're grateful, and I hear all of that, what do you want to intentionally create for yourself next?
I mean, I think I'm now sort of trying to shift my focus to my personal life. Like, I know I can keep writing books. I have a lot of them. I know I have like a couple of good film ideas. But I now want to put a little bit of time into building the home base, if that makes sense.
You deserve that.
And
you've earned it.
What that looks like, because I don't want a situation where my whole world is work. You know what I mean? Like, and it was a lot of it, because it is great work. I'm fortunate to get to do this work, but I don't want that to be my only. I saw how consuming television is, and the process of that. And I was like, oh, you could very easily go 2 or 3 years and come home and it's just me and the dog, and maybe and it's like, and I think I just want to put a little bit of time into building what my home base is.
Good for you.
Yeah. And then I think, I feel like, I think I need to let this settle before I figure out what the next leg of, I know myself, and I usually am a pretty pass it forward type of person, but I don't know exactly what that's going to look like just yet. I need to sort of sit in this space. I just wanted to bring Olga's story to the largest possible audience. And so the mission of doing that at this point is still pretty consuming. Yeah.
Well, Olga Dies Dreaming, directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda, I think.
But with better casting. I was hearing you with that. Like, I'm going to be really thoughtful
right.
about casting. Yeah.
Now, this is one of those stories that you could adapt into. I mean, obviously, immediately the book or the novel and then the screenplay. It's going for TV. Of course, it could make a wonderful movie. But I think TV and the book, obviously, TV is going to have more of a chance to adapt everything within the book because you have longer time. There's so much that gets cut out when you do a movie.
Yeah.
And a stage adaptation, I would love to see a stage adaptation. I think
it's very funny. Well, that's my stress dream, Alan. So maybe we can make it come true. I do like to make things. I actually like to manifest things that I'm afraid of because then they become less scary. So that's an intriguing premise.
Walk towards fear.
You guys follow Xochitl everywhere.
This was so fun. This is great. I love just the energy and the topic of this podcast is so fabulous and fun. Thank you so much.
Holy shit. I can see why you are friends because you are both extroverted introverts.
Yeah.
You're very, very similar in that respect. And I could see a lot of similarities.
It's incredible. It's been so fun to just sort of be a fly on the wall as she moved through this. And it's so inspiring to imagine a thing you've always wanted to do, a dream you've always had, and her very intentional creation. And then leaning into those chance opportunities to have conversations, to apply for the writer's workshop, like to do these things and to go, well, if I'm going to go in, I'm going to go all the fucking way in. It's
a common theme, I think, in our guest. What I'm starting to pick out of this is that the people who are finding their success, who are embracing chance. That's the tagline of the podcast. We say that all the time. But specifically for her, she was telling these stories of like, here's all the things I want to do. Here's what I don't want to do. Here's what I do want to do. And I'm going to intentionally stop doing what I don't want to do while at the same time keeping my eyes open and my head up and grabbing on to every opportunity, no matter how small it may seem at the time, to move me forward towards what I actually want to do. And then all of a sudden, as she was saying, all these things came together pretty much at the same time. And now not only does she have this amazing novel, she's got this pilot that is being shot by Hulu, which is, of course, fingers crossed it gets turned into a full-fledged series because it needs to. But damn, I would love to see this story all over the place.
You're going to have to do all your Broadway connection thingamabobbers. But one of the things that she said really towards the end of the conversation that's really resonating with me, and I'm so much in this space right now, is I'm paraphrasing. She's a go-getter, right? Like I go get the things I want. I go after them. I'm active. And right now I'm really, really pausing. Like she's working her ass off, but I'm not chasing anything new right now. I'm going to sit in this space for a minute. I'm going to be in this space and kind of roll around in it. And it's hard to do that when could you ever imagine? Do you ever just sit in a space and let things roll? You just are on to the next.
I have no idea how to do that. No clue.
We have to force ourselves to.
Yeah. It's very much of just, I'm heading towards this desire, this need to fulfill something. What that is, I haven't gotten there yet. Need more therapy. And then while I'm heading down this path, similar to what Xochitl was talking about, is just letting, I guess I'm thinking like a package sorter, the technical mind of me, thinking package sorter like, nope, don't want that. Okay, this is coming right at me now. So I'm putting on the, I guess, taking out all the bad stuff and letting the good stuff hit me. And then over time, it's going to get you where you want to go.
Absolutely. So you and I were talking about, we're talking about authors. We were talking about Will Smith this morning via text because I am currently listening to his memoir, which one should listen to on audiobook because there's music and singing and it's really, really good. But he tells this story in the openings. This is just what you're saying. His father made he and his brother build a wall when they were like 10 years old, like a whole brick wall out of nothing. And they took him a whole year. He's like, it's child labor. You would get arrested for that shit now. And we're like, there's never going to be a wall.
Like a literal wall, not like a fort.
Wall.
Okay.
Nope. Like a wall made out of bricks where they had to mix the concrete, they had to do all the things. And he opens the book with this. It's really good writing. So when we're thinking about what we talked about with Xochitl, how do you tell these stories? How do you be compelling in this space? And they kept complaining, Dad, we're never going to get a wall. We're never going to get a wall. And his dad said, stop focusing on a goddamn wall. Focus on laying the perfect brick. Lay the perfect brick. And then lay the next perfect brick. And Will said, I go back to that every moment of my life. Stop focusing on the big picture. Just lay a brick. And that's what I think we're talking about. Yeah.
You have to take the first step.
Then the next one.
There's somebody in particular that I know that is much to my frustration. I just watch him kind of flounder because he has such great intentions and such great talent, but he won't get out of his own way to take the first step. And there's only so much help that other people can give, and so much, putting the hook in his mouth and trying to pull him along. Mm-hmm. But eventually you got to start walking, and that leads to jogging, and that leads to running, and that leads to sprinting. And you're going to get where you want to go if you just start walking.
Yeah. But also if we focus on this end result, and we talked about this with Xochitl so much, this idea of I have done everything I can, and now I have to sit in this space of surrender, and what will be for me is coming. The universe will put me in the right space at the right time. There's got to be this surrender of some degree to the how, and just show up and do this next thing that's right in front of you. I loved it, and I love her, and I love the book.
It really is such eloquent writing. To hear that she just picked this up and it naturally pours out of her, it blew me away. Yeah. Because I would think that she has been writing for decades, and this is her debut novel. It's such a well-written book.
Well, she's one to watch. That's for sure. She is one to watch. And you guys listening should follow her. She's on Instagram. I had to laugh. Her actual bio was like, I'm not on Facebook, but I'm a hypocrite. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter. And I love that. So we'll put all those links in the show notes. But her newsletter through The Atlantic is great, or regular blog newsletter. And y'all should subscribe to that. We'll put all of those links in the show notes. This was a fun conversation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to sit with a lot of this, especially this idea of intuition guiding. We thank you for being here with us, and we hope you like the show. And if you do, we want you to follow us. You can do that on Apple Podcasts. You can do it on Spotify now, which is very cool. Do us a favor, rate.
Leave a rating and review. Leave a rating.
Please leave a rating and review, because it matters. And also it just fills our little tiny hearts with gratitude. And more importantly, share
Speak
it.
for yourself. My heart is oversized and bloated.
Yeah, well,
that's
kidding. Actually not true. For those of you who listened to, did you guys know that Alan was on my show? That's just my show, The Brave Files. It's a great conversation. And we talk just about how your heart isn't oversized. And it's oversized, but it's not bloated and gross. You're all about the love, man. Go listen to it.
I have lots of love.
Go and listen to Alan's episode 202 of the Brave Files podcast. Go check it out.
Damn straight.
We're back there together again. Where can folks find us? What should they do if they find us, Alan?
On Instagram at wasitchance, and you can shoot us an email at wasitchancepodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what chances you've taken. What chances have you taken to lead you down your path of creative success? We want to share your stories and let everybody know. We'll start publishing those when we get a nice handful, a nice collection. So hit us up, slip into our DMs or our inboxes.
Thanks for being here with us. You have been listening to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risk for your creative life. I'm Heather Vickery.
And I'm Alan Seals.
We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Mobile phone companies say they offer home internet. But if their internet comes from a cell phone network, you should know. It's just phone internet, not home internet. Keep your home up to speed with Cox. Cox internet is faster and has more reliable download speeds than 5G home internet. Cox is the real home internet you're looking for. Based on Cox analysis of Ookla speed test intelligence data, Q3 2022, and Cox serviceable areas. Visit cox.com/internet for details. Mobile phone companies say they offer home internet. But if their internet comes from a cell phone network, you should know. It's just phone internet, not home internet. Keep your home up to speed with Cox. Cox internet is faster and has more reliable download speeds than 5G home internet. Cox is the real home internet you're looking for. Based on Cox analysis of Ookla speed test intelligence data Q3 2022 and Cox serviceable areas, visit cox.com/internet for details.